Hello and welcome to another edition of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Today I'm going to be interviewing Alan Moore. Alan has had the most fantastic and interesting career, and he's going to tell us all about that in a moment. But first of all, I'd just like to say happy birthday to Alan.
Thank you very much.
It's good of you to join us on your birthday.
You're more than welcome.
Alan, I just want to let people know some of the things that you've been involved with. So, broadly speaking, you've been involved in the design of different kinds of businesses, products and services. And these range from Saab motor cars to Coca-Cola to pet food for Mars to the chain H&M. And many, many other different kinds of businesses. But your particular interest is in very innovative and disruptive businesses. So what is it that brings all of these different aspects of your work together? What is it that runs right through the whole thing?
Well, I think that two things essentially. One is, I think, creatively responding to the challenge that you're presented with. And the way that you respond to that is through what I would call a designed approach, because what you're exploring and trying to achieve is the optimal and most effective response to that challenge. Design gives you the capacity to think about the tools you may use, the processes you may use to get there, the materials, the products, the user experience. So working on the store opening strategies for Hennes and Mauritz in North America is obviously a very different thing to sitting down with a law firm and talking about how they could use digital tools to completely re-engineer and redesign how a law firm works. But for me, actually, you're still using the same process, which is trying to find the optimal response to the challenge that you're faced with. Design is the capacity to blend all of those different types of things together creatively to create a great result. That's how I see it.
Okay. So we've called this, the start of this series, Good Design is Good Business. And that was kind of prompted by an article that you flagged up for me from Fast Co, which was about how million-dollar businesses or multi-million-dollar businesses really put design at the heart of everything they do. And I guess it's no surprise to anybody who looks at that kind of world. But could you just talk us through some of those businesses? Because there's some real iconic names there. Things like Instagram and Airbnb and Uber and that kind of thing. Businesses that have been in the news a lot recently.
Yeah.
And is it all about the technology? Is it about these big consumer brands and the disruptiveness and the way they exploded onto the scene, or is there something more going on there?
Well, I think that the interesting examples, I think, are things like Uber, Airbnb, and the other one that you mentioned,
Instagram.
Instagram is, I think, a ferocious attention to detail in the user experience. So being able to navigate through a business service which is presented digitally, effortlessly, seamlessly, easily, where people are able to really be able to use that service properly. So in that sense, design is really being put at the heart of it and taking away the complexity, because there will be a lot of complexity in those businesses and those technology platforms and the way they're designed. But from the user experience, you're not front loading that. You're taking all of that complexity and embedding it much, much deeper into the systems design, in a sense, so that actually I, as a user, just find that a really easy thing to use. And that, for me, is where that sort of effort is well worth it, because ultimately then people will come back again and again and again to want to use those products and services. I think, actually, I mean, Instagram is also constantly iterating. I mean, that's the other interesting thing about these platforms is that there is a constant iteration. So the design is also a constant iteration of the business, the platform, the user experience, the technology, whatever. I mean, you can overdo it, of course you can, but on the other hand, you know, one should be completely committed to constantly sort of evolving and developing what you've got to offer your customers.
I came across an interesting discussion the other day where someone was suggesting that programmers get to the point where they have to justify their existence, so they're constantly, as you say, iterating, but not necessarily to the benefit of the customer or the user.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that that's a shame if you're in that position. I think that it depends on how you drive the business, which is only implementing those things which you really ultimately believe will benefit the business. I mean, yes, you can over-tinker, and you can, you know, add layers of complexity. I mean, I think that's where great design comes in. I mean, someone said to me, the work of great great design is work properly resolved or something. The idea that you get to a place of real resolution. And I think that's, if you look at something like Instagram, for example, is a really great example of a very resolved piece of work. If you let, however, you know, people run amok with the business, where they feel that by doing work they're adding complexity and complication to the process, and that's not good design, because that's just going to frustrate people and irritate people. You know, it's a bit like the other day, FedEx was supposed to be coming up to pick a package up from my house, and said they would be there between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, but it turned up at 11:30. You know, that's a really bad experience. That's a bad piece of design. You know,
I'm having a similar problem with LinkedIn at the moment. They keep telling me that all my problems are caused because I'm using the wrong browser. And I should be telling all the people I'm trying to connect with that they need to change browsers too.
Yeah, so essentially then that's really bad design. And I think in a sense, if you think about where, for example, banks have got to in their strive for efficiency, actually efficiency of savings. I mean, I no longer have a business manager from my account in Cambridge. They're up in Manchester. And every time you call, you have to put in, you know, 16 digits, and then you have to put in this code and that code. And you could just hold your hands up and go, I just don't want to do this. So that's really bad design, because by the time someone has got to actually speak to a human being about human things, they are so frustrated that you're not going to have a productive conversation, I don't think.
So the newer banks that are coming on the scene at the moment, if they really take that and give people a better experience, they've already got you know, a semi-committed audience who are waiting for that change to be offered to them.
I think that's absolutely right. I think, again, you know, you could really sit down and think about how you could take the banking experience, either from a business perspective or from a, you know, an everyday person's perspective, and blending really high-end you know, customer attention to their needs, rather than trying to force them into products which may not necessarily fit them. So again, you know, you've got that industrial scale thing. You know, we make money by the scaling of these products, but actually human beings don't fit into these products in the right type of way. So I think there is an argument for mass customization for people. That could be made more efficient through forms of technology, and then also the idea that, you know, you could have something on your smartphone or on your phone that advises you and lets you know at all moments in terms of how you're spending and what you're spending, just so that you become far more aware and hands-on in terms of, you know, the way that you've got to manage your budget on a daily basis or a weekly basis or something.
Yeah.
There's no reason why that can't be done.
Yeah, and I know some banks are better than others at it. Could we look? We've talked quite a bit about platforms and technology and that kind of thing. Could we look for a moment at some of the more physical products that you've been involved? Because I think people, I'm maybe generalising here, but people generally associate design with something that they can see and hold.
Yeah.
where the design for some of the other services is something that goes on in the background.
Yes.
But I know you've been involved with some quite revolutionary physical products as well, and the design not just of the product itself, but of the whole way the business runs.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we were talking about it a little bit yesterday, but this company, Flute Office, which is designing and manufacturing office furniture, but engineered out of paper products and cardboard, essentially. And of course, people may have a certain fixed notion in their head about ultimately what that looks like, but these things look as beautiful as an Apple computer. And the reason why these are so fantastic is because they can offer businesses an entirely different way of thinking of how they manage, 1,000 desks and 1,000 chairs and 1,000, other wants and needs of an office. These things can come in; they all come flat packed. They can be constructed in a number of minutes rather than taking maybe half an hour to put a wooden and steel desk together. You don't ever own any of this furniture. You rent it on a service-based model. It means that when the term of the service comes to an end, Flute Office will come in, they'll take away all of the desks, they'll then either refurbish them or they'll go back into being recycled and they'll come out as new products. And so there's no waste in the system. And I know through some of the research we did that there are large organizations out there which have warehouses, aircraft hangars full of metal and wooden desks which they're storing, costing them huge amounts of money, huge amounts of waste, or it goes into landfill. And so for me, this is a great example of a revolutionary way of rethinking an entire industry.
Okay.
Now, yeah.
What I was going to say was that the Wall Street Journal and the Dow Jones have linked good design, excuse me,
yeah,
to very profitable businesses in no uncertain terms. But at what point do you get involved? I mean, take the Flute Office as an example.
Well, I think
where does it come up that you can demonstrate, or that you don't need to demonstrate, that designing things well is actually adding value to the business and will in the long run be a very profitable activity?
Well, I mean, I think that for me, you would only hire me if you really wanted to kind of go down that road or at least explore it. I think there is enough evidence out there that shows, I mean, Apple carries more cash than the American government. I mean, I think the argument in terms of, good design is good for business is the question then of, do you know what is good design? Do you know how you could build a team that can bring great design to the table? Because again, it is a blend of different types of skill sets, and that people actually are prepared to work towards the same type of vision. I'm very happy to come in and advise people and talk to them about it. As you know, I can run workshops around it, or actually I'm very happy to get stuck in, roll my sleeves up with a blank sheet of paper and say, right, well, how are we going to redesign this business? That could be, revolutionary, disruptive if needs be, because normally, businesses that kind of do those types of things, like Airbnb, is a highly disruptive business. The hotels don't thank Airbnb for what they're doing. But what's interesting is exploring that space where you can also create great value. So design is about creating value for people in their daily lives. So as we were just discussing, like with banks, there is an opportunity out there to create exponential value for the 60 million people in this country that will, at some point need a bank account.
I know that some of the work that you've been doing around this area you've actually taken it into the educational establishment. So you're passing this message on and demonstrating to students and other people involved in institutions and other organisations. Just the importance of all of this, and I guess the way it's going to become more and more important as the world changes and as consumers become more powerful and have more choice. So what is actually going on there with the educational aspect of the work that you do?
Well, it's very simple, which is either working with MBA students or in an exec ed environment, and bringing along maybe a way of thinking about the world, thinking about business, thinking about organizations, thinking about the design of those things, where they have another perspective on the way that things could be done. I feel that there's sort of more work to be done there in some respects, but I think it's also maybe potentially a generational thing. But I sense that we'll see a huge shift in the next 5 years or thereabouts, where well, we're already seeing it really, which is entrepreneurialism and innovation has to become the norm as opposed to the exception to the way we think about business. And I just feel that if in any way I can either inspire, or I can motivate, or I can help people see that there is another way of doing things, then I'm very pleased about that, because it's about many people making these things happen rather than just one person making these things happen.
So what I'm getting is that it's not simply about good design makes more profit. It's about good design being an integral part of life, and more of a philosophical way of looking at business than the pure profit motive. Yeah.
So in my book No Straight Lines, I talk about this principle of craftsmanship, and the craftsman actually brings the Holy Trinity together, which is the hand, the heart, and the mind. But he brings those to bear on, is what I create for the collective good. Now, the reality is that I think if you really create true value, if you really focus on creating that value, then the money always comes. Again, I think that Apple is a fantastic example of a company which has just, relentlessly focused on great design, both in products, hardware, software, the ecosystem that it's kind of evolved and developed, where actually they have created real value for people. And I just feel that when people just feel they're in business, and it's one of the things I try and impress on younger kids, which is go into business to change the world. Don't go into business to make money. We all need to make money. We all need to make a living. And I think that what you will see is that the bigger effort you put into changing the world will see, the result in your bank balance as a consequence of that. But it means that you make the right decisions in the right ways, I think, actually. And we have seemed to, we definitely, if you look at what's happened over the last 5 years with the banking crisis, which just seems to go on and on and on in terms of what people have been prepared to do to make money, ultimately that never really stacks up as something that has longevity.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying about craftsmanship, I think that's reflected in the huge number of makespace organisations or places that are just proliferating around the world.
Yes.
It's a move itself, and that is coming right back to what you were saying about the something very intrinsic in our souls about making something that we can hold in our hands.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it may well be that the analog world becomes increasingly more important again to us. So although I don't think it ever went away, but technology or an app just doesn't solve all of the world's problems.
What about the Internet of Things? Where the things we're talking about, the actual physical products, are in some way connected to it through the technology. Do you think that is going to have a big impact on design?
Well, data already has had a huge impact on our world. It's kind of interesting looking at sort of this year. So last year was big data. This year is the Internet of Things. We do seem to sort of rush towards this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think there comes a point when, and there's no doubt about it, that what we call machine-to-machine communications or the Internet of Things, where sensors of one form or another, which can measure and monitor, but equally talk to each other and send that information to other places, allows us to actually start to also think about how we re-engineer our world. I mean, in many ways, the Internet of Things and medical technology, this is an area of massive change and revolution. We have the means to completely reinvent the way that healthcare works, to move from a world of after the event to a world where preventative medicine, data monitoring will play a fundamental role in how we manage our healthcare. So we will see a fundamental redesign of all healthcare systems in the Western world, I think, to be honest with you. So I'm quite looking forward to that, I think, and there's a great opportunity there.
Okay, and we're coming to the end of our discussion today, but I know you very kindly agreed to come back and do some more talks for me.
Yes.
Because it's such a huge topic, and we've barely scratched the surface today. But can I just end by asking, what's the biggest frustration you're feeling at the moment about the design world, as a concept?
Well, I think that we get stuck in the we seem to like easy to hang on handles, which then start to get in the way of everything. I mean, so service design for me is something that seems to be incredibly popular, and I think that we don't teach enough design in schools or in business schools. Actually, I think it should be part of the program in many senses, and also understanding that design is a multidisciplinary exercise, and that's where I think, in terms of the world of business, this becomes a bit of a problem, because everything is kind of thought of or sort of realized in silos. And so what I want people to really understand is, one, that great designed businesses, in through their products and their services, their user experience, anything and everything that touches the world should be thought about deeply, and you have to look at it in a holistic sense first. There's a great quote by Bill Bailey, and Bill's doing a gig, and he says, people come up to me and he says, Bill, how do you come up with your jokes? He says, well, I start with a laugh and I work backwards. What do I need to do to make that amount of laughter? And in many ways, design is also, for me, that process, in the terms of, let's start with the very best thing we could possibly make. And of course, that makes a lot of people very fearful, but this is a very natural response, I think, or where do we really want to get to? And what does that look like? And what does that feel like? Maybe, when I worked on this well-being drink for the Coca-Cola company a few years ago, we actually wrote a letter. That's how we started the process. And from
a letter from a happy consumer.
A letter from a very happy consumer. And then on that basis, then we said, well, so now we know where we need to start, and now we know how we're going to approach this in terms of the design of the drink, the design of the bottle. So I had designed and commissioned the first asymmetric and the only asymmetric bottle in the Coca-Cola system, period. And it was all based on this idea of a drink fitting into your daily life. It had to fit into your hand. So it had to be designed to do that way. Very, very interesting conversations we had about that.
I bet. What I'd like to do is to get you to hold that thought.
Sure.
Because what we've ended with is the start of a process. And so the next time we speak, I'd like to start with that.
Yes.
And get into, how do you get started? Who do you talk to? How do you build teams? How do you get across the idea of good design in a business? So I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. To anyone who's listening to this, if you subscribe to the channel that you're watching this on, then you'll be sure to pick up the next interview that I do with Alan. And if you want to ask any questions, then please do. You can do it on the YouTube channel in the comments box underneath this video, or on any of the other places that we're going to be putting the video, and we'll pick them up. So again, thank you very much for joining us, Alan. I hope you enjoy the rest of your birthday, and have a great lunch.
Great, thank you very much.
Talk to you again soon.
Cheers.